This is New Patreon Series number 49A, part 1 of a 3-part series. We're going to be talking about the classic Merkabah ascent of Yeshua and Paul and Mary, Miriam Magdala, versus the Hekalot practice of later Jewish descenders of the Merkabah, as they were called. So let's review Merkabah mysticism. In the pre-exilic period, before the 6th century BC, an important legend was that of Jacob's dream. He dreamed of a stairway between earth and heaven. It was called the Sulam. It's a place where the angels ascended and descended from the heavens. And later the idea that humans could also ascend this staircase, this mythical or magical staircase, was something that developed in Jewish mysticism. But here the idea that angels visit human beings and bring them messages, the malachim, from God, resulted in the idea of this intercommunication that could exist between the heavens and the earth. Now, the kind of posture that was done by Jewish mystics, it was called a shakad, or a vigil. It was a position in which the head was down between the knees, the eyes were closed, and the imagination was exercised. And that is where one heard the voice of God and where one imagined the things that were brought into his mind in prayer. The story of Elijah is key to much of this, and Elijah is assumed bodily into heaven in a chariot, actually a war chariot. That the word for chariot is Merkabah. It means a mobile chariot, one that is on wheels that can move back and forth, that's occupied by the leader or the general of an army, drawn by horses. Now, in the post-exilic period, after the 6th century BC, where there's a tremendous amount of Babylonian influence and imagery that comes into Jewish mysticism. There already has been a lot of Near Eastern imagery in the Temple of Solomon in the much earlier period, but now in some of the kinds of mystic experiences that Jews experience, the imagery is formed on the basis of the temple images and other images that are found in Babylon. In fact, not only the Jewish, later the angels, but the Jewish demons and the whole demonology is descended from the images that were given of Babylonian deities. The most important thing here and the basis for Merkabah mysticism as it developed was Ezekiel's vision of Yahweh on his throne chariot, his Merkabah. And in this vision, which we're going to take a look at a little more closely, he's held up by the cherubim and angelic beings with 4 faces and all kinds of different things that are parts of Babylonian imagery. The chariot throne, or Merkabah, had wheels like that used by a king in battle as his traveling war throne. The 4 Ophanim guardian angels appear as chariot wheels full of eyes. If we look at the little illustration I've given on the right-hand side, and it represents the omniscience or the all-knowingness of Godhead. You see, in the exile, the Jews were taken, all the educated Jews and the royalty and so on were forced to be taken across the mountains and the deserts to Babylon in their own communities, and they no longer were in possession of their temple. Their temple was destroyed. And the temple in the ancient Near East was where the God resided, the God lived, so God had no place to live. But the prophets, like Ezekiel, said, no, God, our God, is so powerful, he does not confine to just one geographical location or one temple. He is everywhere. He is omniscient and omnipotent. And that was one of the reasons for this description of this mystical vision. It signified universal divine presence. Yahweh is mobile, omniscient, omnipotent. He can be everywhere at once. He's no longer limited to the temple in Jerusalem. So the chariot throne, or Merkabah, is made of many angels being driven by, quote, the likeness of a man, or Yahweh, the heavenly divine man. Now, because of the Babylonian influence in the imagery, the four Ophanim angels form the basic structure of the Merkabah. The bodies of the Ophanim, guardians of the throne, are like that of human beings, but each of them has 3 animal and 1 human face. They're called the chariot, or the living creatures. So here's one way of representing them. It's very difficult because they're not graphical descriptions. When an artist tries to draw these things, he has to do the best he can. But here we have the 4 chariot corresponding to the 4 directions the chariot can go, north, east, south, and west. The faces are that of a man, a lion, an ox, and that's later changed to a cherub or cherub, as the later Christians would call it, and an eagle. And since there are 4 angels, and each has 4 faces, there's a total of 16 faces. The angel face of a man is always on the east side and always looks up at the likeness of a man. That's Yahweh, who drives the chariot. So Ezekiel's vision of Yahweh and his throne chariot, his Merkabah, is conflated with the Enochian Shemayim, or heavens, to create a mandala-like roadmap for Merkabah ascent for Jewish mystics. The Merkabah mystic ascends through 7 palaces, or hechalot, which are located in the 7th heaven, and he reaches his ultimate destination in the innermost palace where the throne of glory is situated. That's the throne of God. The culmination of the ascent is a direct vision of the divine glory, or the kavod, or power, or gavura, referred to by various technical expressions, including, most prominently, the beholding of the king of his beauty. The ascent to the Merkabah of Yahweh was being practiced from early times, maybe 200 BC, till about 190 or maybe 200 AD, and it was contemporary with Yeshua. And since several stories of heavenly ascent are transmitted in the early Christian literature, it's reasonable to conclude that Merkabah ascent was a part of Yeshua's inner circle teaching. We can take a look at the Gospel of Thomas Logian number 11, which is authentic, an authentic Devar of Yeshua, where he says, "This heaven and the one above it shall pass away," that is, they are impermanent. The concept of pre-exilic Hebrew cosmos was of the Hebrew day and night heavens, the day and night Shemayim. So here we have under the world, under the earth is the night heaven, and above the earth is the day heaven, and above that, beyond that, transcending all that, is where God is, God lives. So in the post-exilic period, there are 10 Shemayim, and we have this most clearly exemplified in the books of Enoch and 2nd Enoch. The first 2 are physical, and the third 10 of the tenths are immortal spirit. So the first is the day heaven, the second is the night heaven, the third is where the Pardes and Gehenna are. At the east side of Eden is where paradise, the Pardes, where the Kabbalistic masters gather on the Shabbat, on Sabbath, spiritually, in their imagination, to discuss and learn the secrets of heaven, the Ratzim. And Gehenna is also the place where people are purified after death, is located in that third heaven. The fourth heaven, the heavenly host of angelic beings. In the fifth, there were the fallen Nephilim, the fallen angels who mated with the daughters of men and brought about the catastrophe of the flood, are sealed and imprisoned in the fifth heaven. In the sixth heaven are the archangels and also other interesting characters like the phoenix, which is related to the sun, and the cherubim. In the seventh heaven are the guardians of the throne of God, the Ophanim. And the eighth is what we would think of as the zodiac of the fixed stars. It's called Muzalot. And the ninth is Kuvachim, the zodiacal houses. And then the 10th heaven is Aravot, where the Merkabah, the throne of God, is located. So Yeshua says that this heaven, the first heaven, the day heaven, here, will disappear. And the second heaven, the one above it, the night heaven, will pass away. They're impermanent. But all the rest of these heavens are permanent. They are made of spirit. They are invisible to the eyes of men and can only be seen with the eye of spirit by the mystics. So the eternal olam of the Abba consists of these seven. So the olam of God and the four olamim of the universe have been described very early in Sefer Yetzirah from about the 2nd century BC, where the Kabbalistic emanation of the cosmos is described. The heavenly myth of the Hellenistic myth of the heavenly man, the heavenly anthropos, is very influential in Jewish mysticism as well as other Hellenistic, Greek, and Asian forms of mysticism. The idea that the universe is anthropomorphic, it's man-shaped. So the universe is like a great human being with all the same organs and so on. And according to the Kabbalistic creation story, there is a formula that's used, Ein Sof, or. Ein means nothing. There is nothing. Nothing exists at all. And that's represented here with this just white space up above on the right-hand corner. And after that, Ein Sof is created, is brought into existence by God. That means not limited. That is infinity, infinite space. And then finally, the Ein Sof hour, the limitless light, the infinite light, is projected into the universe by Godhead. So at the crown, or Keter, is Godhead with Chachma, wisdom, and Bina, compassion. So here's a little drawing of how that might be. We have Ein Sof, hour, and then the emanation of the Keter, the crown. The archetypal world of the 10 Sephirot and 22 paths, or Absolute, is emanated from that. But the vessels, which is what the Sephirot are, each one is a vessel containing a virtue of Godhead, like truth and beauty and so on. Each one is isolated from the other, and they cannot communicate as a system. And so the shattering of the vessels occurs. The vessels are shattered to put them into communication with 22 paths of wisdom, but it also creates duality. The duality that exists between the good stuff in the vessels and the negative stuff, because the shards of the vessels, the broken pieces of the vessels, fly away and they become what we would think of as evil and darkness. They are the klipot, or the broken dark forces that coexist, intermixed with the light. And And they are the voids or vortices of negativity and opposition to unity and love and health and intelligence. They're the psychic obstacles to union. Disunity is the basic Kabbalistic concept of evil. And Adam Kadmon is then emanated as the form of the universe. He's called the macroprosopus, the vast face. He's the first Adam, or mankind, of Jewish Midrash. He's the second Adam, by the way, of Pauline Christology, because Paul speaks in a little different terms. He speaks of the eternal Adam, the Christ, as the second Adam who manifested. But in Jewish Kabbalah, the first mankind, the original mankind, which is a spiritual mankind after whom the physical Adam is created, is called the first Adam. And then the microprosopus, the small face, is the anthropomorphic universe or the cosmos itself. So we have to understand the concept of what existed before the cosmos existed. What was outside of the cosmos? What was God before and after the creation in the Enochic tradition? I'm quoting now from the histories of the hidden God, the concealment and revelation in Western Gnostic, esoteric, and mystical traditions, that was edited by April de Konig and Grant Adamson and published in English in Durham, North Carolina. In this series of myths, I have drawn a diagram to help you to understand it. I drew this when I was in theological seminary, whatever, more than 50, 60 years ago, for me to understand a little bit better what these heavens were. You'll see up on top is the highest heaven, the zodiacal houses, and then the 10th heaven of God, and so on. So, in 2nd Enoch chapter 24, God speaks to Enoch about the events, quote, before the very beginning, all that was created from non-being and visible things from invisible things. And I commanded the lowest beings, let one of the invisible beings come out visibly. And Adoil descended, extremely large. And I looked at him, and behold, in his belly he had a great Eon or Olon. And I said to him, disintegrate yourself, Adoil, and let what is disintegrated from you become visible. And he disintegrated himself, and there came out from him the great Olon. And thus it carried all the creation, which I had wished to create, and I saw how good it was. And I placed for myself a Merkabah throne, and I sat down on it. And to the light I spoke, you go up higher and be solidified, and become the foundation for the highest things. And there's nothing higher than the light, except nothing itself. And here he put in the third heaven at the south Eden, also at the east, and Hades or Gehenna at the north, and also at the west. So this is the Kabbalistic Ein Sof Or, not limited, unlimited light, and so on. And I spoke, and I extended myself upward from my Merkabah throne. So here is the macroprosopus, the divine man. And then Archos came into existence, the invisible powers and principalities, the enemies of the righteous on earth, came into existence. This is the lower foundation. This is the earth, and man is upon the earth, and beneath it is where these lower creatures are imprisoned. Now we have Jewish Talmudic accounts from the 1st century contemporary with Yeshua. Here is one. Uh, Subsequently, 2 other disciples of Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, he was contemporary of Yeshua. He was the one who established the first Jewish seminary after the destruction of the temple and of Jerusalem. So 2 other disciples of Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, walking together, said to each other, "Let us also talk together about the Masa'a Merkabah," that means the work of the chariot. And no sooner did Rabbi Yeshua, not our Yeshua, another Rabbi Yeshua, begin speaking than a rainbow-like appearance, that's the same kind of thing that Ezekiel talks about in Ezekiel 1, was seen upon the thick clouds which covered the sky, and angels came to listen, as men do, to hear wedding music. This wedding music theme, the theme of Merkabah, is linked up with the themes of wedding and wedding celebrations. And as you will recall, Yeshua had several parables about the Messiah and about the coming humanity, the new humanity, and the union with God that were based on the wedding theme and the wedding festivals. On hearing the things related by Rabbi Joe say, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai blessed his disciples and said, "Blessed are the eyes that beheld these things. Indeed, I saw myself in a dream, together with you, seated like the select ones upon Mount Sinai." And then you might take a look at Exodus 24, where they, the nobles of Israel, saw the God of Israel. And under his feet was a work like a pavement, made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. But God did not lay his hand upon the nobles of Israel. They saw him, they ate and drank. So they were not destroyed by looking at the face of God, because they were nobles of Israel. They were the saints of Israel. And that is the point of this account. And remember that God is portrayed as being above a sapphire sea and so on in the Merkabah stories. And I heard a heavenly voice saying, "Enter the banquet hall and take your seats with your disciples and your disciples' disciples among the elect, the highest, 3rd class." In other words, these are the saints of Israel who are able to sit at the table, the banquet table, the Messianic banquet, with Yahweh in the highest heaven. So we have an understanding of Yeshua's Messianic parables, the wedding banquet, the elect, the Messianic banquet, the marriage of heaven and earth. All are special themes of 1st century Merkabah mysticism. Tosefta Hagiga, chapter 2, says that 4 entered the orchard, the Pardes: Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiba. One peeked and died. That was Ben Azai. He looked, but he wasn't worthy, and he died. One peeked and was smitten. He looked, he wasn't worthy enough, and he got very sick. One peeked and cut down the shoots. One of them saw, and he was very worthy, but he was a heretic. And one ascended safely and descended safely. And who is that? Rabbi Akiba, who is the main saint of Jewish mysticism at the end of the 1st century, who was tortured by the Romans and who endured all kinds of things. And to him is attributed one of the great Merkabah journeys that we will find as we study this. So there's a great danger of insanity or death in this experience, because it was an experience. It was perhaps a vision or a series of perhaps ecstatic visions, but it could be very dangerous. So go to part 2, for the rest of this.